Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, hello and welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, brought to you by Believe. Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia here with you for this week's show. I think this is our last week without our steady host, Mike Anguilano. So I think this is the last time, hopefully for the foreseeable future, that you'll just be stuck with me and Jasper. We'll get back the lead man, Mike. But Jasper, you're here with me. You're not roaming around Europe, having the time of your life. You're stuck talking about the Pistons.
No, I'm not roaming around Europe in Florence like Mike is, even though my sister lives there. I don't know how that works, how Mike gets to go there before I do. That was very nice of her, though. He hit me up, and he's like, hey, man, like, what should I do? And she sent over, like, a bunch of different recommendations for him to go to. So big shout out to my sister on that one. But, yeah, we can't wait to have Mike back. Hope he enjoys himself. Make lots of memories for me, because I wish I could be there soon enough.
It looks like he's having the time of his life over there, just from the pictures and posts that he's made. So jealous of him. But hey, we're here to talk about the Pistons. There's really not much better than that. Am I right?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you one thing that I like better than that. I have really been digging HBO's Winning Time. I want to actually say that. Like, we have stuff to get into, but I binged that over the weekend. I'm loving that show. I don't know if you've watched it at all, Aaron. Have you gotten a chance to?
I was planning on starting it. I actually, back when I was in school, it was, the first season of it just came out. My professor would always talk to me about it and tell me to watch it because he knew, we had this podcast and whatnot. But I never actually watched it. I mean, I've had conversations about it, but I've never watched it. I've heard a lot of good things.
I didn't think I would like it, but like usually when they try and recreate stuff that happened, especially when it comes to sports, because they try to over dramatize, it doesn't really work out. But I think they did an awesome job with like the casting and everything there. Like it's realistic enough to where you buy into the characters, but not too real to where you get the impression that they're like trying to just like have fun with history. They're more just having fun with it. Like it's dramatized to the point where you don't have to take it too seriously. It stands up as it's kind of its own thing. So highly recommend it. I like it. I want a season 3.
Okay. There's a little show review with Jasper. I will definitely have to check that out. I'll put that on my list moving forward. But I do want to get into a couple interesting topics that we have for this week's show. Before we do that, I did want to mention our sponsor, as always, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games, available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.
Aaron, you betting on the Lions tonight?
I have a lot of bets out there on the Lions tonight. I'm ready to be hurt again. So
you poor young man.
And listens to this podcast on Friday, hopefully I'm on the right side of history. Hopefully I have some slips that cashed, but we'll see. It was a lot of betting with your heart and a lot less betting with your mind, which is usually not the way to go about that sort of thing.
Well, especially when it comes to the Lions. If you bet with your heart, you'll always find it broken. So, as a wise man once said, nobody ever went broke betting against the Detroit Lions. But no, I'm hoping everybody's going to be happy after tonight's game. We'll see what happens. No Chris Jones. That's pretty big. I like those David Montgomery touchdown scorer props. I think that's a pretty decent bet. So, yeah,
that's on my slip. I will say.
It's got to be on everybody's.
But if you're looking to bet basketball, if you're looking to bet Pistons, their win line for the season is right at 27 on BetOnline. So if you feel strongly one way or the other and you want to place a bet, win some money, head on over to BetOnline. Again, use our promo code BLEAV for a 50% welcome bonus on your initial deposit. Okay, let's move in to our first topic of the show today. And this one was brought to you courtesy of Jasper himself. We were prepping for the show, and again, we've mentioned it each of the last few weeks throughout this offseason. We're really in the doldrums of the offseason. There's really not a whole lot going on, not just Piston related, but NBA related overall. So we were trying to come up with, a topic that's not going to put you to sleep, because that's not our goal. We want to bring you entertaining Pistons talk, and Jasper came up with a great topic. We are each going to give a trade that the Pistons could theoretically make at some point this season. We both looked at it from a realistic point of view. I used some of the reporting that we've heard throughout the last year or so as well to influence the trade that I came up with. But we have two separate trades. Each of us came up with one, and they're trades we feel the Pistons could make at some point, either heading up to this season or during the season. And Jasper, since this was your idea, I'm going to let you lead it off. You're the leadoff hitter here. What was your trade for the Pistons? Break it down for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping to just, slap a nice single into right field on this one. Before people get mad at us, like you said, it's the doldrums of the summer. Not much is happening around the NBA. So this is more of a thought exercise than necessarily something that we would even, think the Pistons would do, or that they even should necessarily do. There's, I think, upsides and downsides to both of the trades that we kind of threw out there. But, really looking around the league as well, I think we have to say before we even get into these, it's hard to find a trade partner for the Pistons. There are not a lot of teams that are tanking. I mean, really, and even the ones that you expect to, like Portland, well, they haven't pulled off that Damian Lillard trade yet. So who even knows what's happening with a couple of these teams here? For me, I threw out what I think is a simple, definitely risky, but a trade that could work for both teams involved in this equation. I decided to move, despite wanting to move Marvin Bagley and Killian Hayes, Bojan Bogdanovic to the Orlando Magic in return for Jonathan Isaac in 2 second-round picks. And the reason I did this is for a couple reasons. First off, I think just getting 2 second-round picks is, it's nice. It's a nice little return for something there. And secondly, as we've discussed, there is just a logjam at multiple positions on this roster and no good answers at others. As of right now, that small forward position, power forward position doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And we saw it even last year with Bojan Bogdanovic playing the 4. The Pistons defense and their rebounding really, really suffered. I just think that even if you're putting Isaiah Stewart out there at the 4, there are real issues with putting Bojan at the 3. If you bring in Jonathan Isaac, I think it helps you in 2 ways. One, the defense instantly improves if he's out on the floor. 2, you can bring him off of the bench to start. And he signed not just for this year, but for 1 more year after that, whereas Bojan Bogdanovic is not. Bojan does have 2 years remaining on his contract as well. But with Bojan, it's a little bit different, where you're paying him $20 million, and with Jonathan Isaac, you're paying him about 17.5. There's obviously a huge injury risk there, but I think also with the risk that you're taking at playing Isaiah Stewart at the 4, if Jonathan Isaac can be healthy and Isaiah Stewart doesn't really work out at the 4, you have a backup plan there. That is something beyond having to, hope that Isaiah Livers can really, really improve to the point where he's able to be your starting power forward. Or God forbid, Marvin Bagley plays power forward for you. I think if Jonathan Isaac, a player who has in his 4 years actually playing, shot better than 34% from 3-point range in 3 of those 4 years, I think that is a guy that you can look at as potentially being an option for you if Isaiah Stewart doesn't work at the starting 4 position and you have to move into the bench as either a 4 there or a 5 there. I just think it gives you a little bit more flexibility. It keeps you younger. Jonathan Isaac still is 25 years old, so he's not an old player. And truly, honestly, there's not that much downside in here. The idea that you're going to get a first round pick back for Bojan Bogdanovic doesn't really seem realistic at this point. So I think your best bet is to get whatever you can in terms of draft capital, and also try and get a young, high upside player that is, not going to break the bank and require you to give up first round picks in return. So for me, I think this is a relatively low downside, but potentially very high upside move for the Pistons, and one that I think is worth trying out.
Yeah, I told you before the show when we talked about our trade ideas that I really liked this idea because I'm not a proponent of trading Bojan Bogdanovic, but I'm also realistic from the standpoint of the writing on the wall seems to be that it's going to happen. It seems that the Pistons are in trade talks and in rumors every other week regarding Bogdanovic. And if you look at a team like Orlando, who's looking to take a step forward, they have some pieces now in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. They had a couple first round picks this year as well. So they've got pieces, they've got guys. They improved last year, and there's now that next step that they need to take, kind of like the Pistons. But I think it's a little bit clearer for the Magic, who, didn't have their star player out all last year, that they need to take a legitimate step forward and become a playoff team, become a play-in team. And a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic does really help them in that regard. He gives them experience. He gives them shooting. He gives them a complementary piece alongside Banchero and Wagner. So it makes a lot of sense for Orlando. And in Detroit's regard, it gives them a guy in Isaac who's another defensive-minded, probably more of a 4 now than he was a 3 at this point with all of the injuries that he's endured. And they get the extra bonus of a couple second-round picks, which we know are near and dear to Troy Weaver. He does, like to deal when it comes to second-rounders. So as tough as it is, and as much as I am against moving Bogdanovic, I see the merit in going for an upside play in a guy like Isaac, who's younger and has the defensive upside. The biggest drawback to that type of trade, specifically for Isaac, is the health concerns. He's just not been able to stay healthy. As a player, he's so tantalizing because of everything that he can do, but his biggest weakness is his inability to stay on the court. I mean, he's had season after season that's just been marred with injury, and he went, years without playing in an NBA game. So there's legitimate concern there, but I could see this being a bit more realistic towards the trade deadline if Orlando's in the playoff picture, in the play-in picture, and Detroit's on the outside looking in. I think that's when this could maybe make a little bit more sense. I don't know if that's how you feel, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I think you need to see at least some health from Jonathan Isaac, and you just have to see any sort of an extended stretch. To be clear, I don't really have much faith that he will remain healthy. This is more of a thought exercise than anything else. There's also downside for the Pistons in the sense that, like, Bogdanovic is their best shooter on the roster, and they are already a team that does not have a whole lot of shooting. Orlando, I think, is, it makes sense for them. Roughly equivalent salaries. Bogdanovic is a much better shooter. it makes their front court make a little bit more sense moving forward. And to be honest, I just think it just hasn't happened for Isaac in Orlando, and I just don't know if it ever will. So I think for, both teams, there's upside and downside there. I mean, Jonathan Isaac is still young and a great defender, and if he could somehow pan out, boy, they could have given up a great player for, 2 years of Bojan Bogdanovic, which, it's not nothing. But I think also from Detroit's perspective, we've been talking about, like, where does Joe Harris fit into this equation? I think it makes it a lot easier to see exactly what Joe Harris would do on this roster. Also, if you trade Bogdanovic, I do think that makes things a little bit clearer from that perspective, even if you do lose the shooting. Also opens up, I think, minutes for Marcus Sasser, and you can really see more of what you have there. So, yeah. Aaron, I know you had a way more complicated trade than I did, but I really like what you did as well. Mind walking us through what your idea was?
Yeah, so my deal is between 3 teams, obviously the Pistons, and then the Dallas Mavericks and Philadelphia 76ers. The trade would send out Bojan Bogdanovic, as did your trade, but it would send Bojan Bogdanovic to the Dallas Mavericks. The Philadelphia 76ers would also be sending Furkan Korkmaz to Dallas, and Detroit would receive Tobias Harris from Philadelphia and Tim Hardaway Jr. from Dallas. Detroit would then send Joe Harris, Marvin Bagley, and a 2024 second-round pick to Philadelphia. Philadelphia would also receive Toronto's 2025 second-round pick from Dallas. I will try to include a screen grab, a screenshot, whatever, in the YouTube video of that trade for people watching or listening on YouTube. If you're listening anywhere else, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see that. But here's why I made this trade, right? For some of the same reasons you did with Bogdanovic. He's been in trade talk so much. Dallas is one of those teams that we have heard very consistently being tagged to Bogdanovic. So I'm putting him there. I'm giving Dallas what they want in Bogdanovic. Detroit is really getting back a better fit at the 4 spot, because with the roster right now, they do need a 4. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Even with Isaiah Stewart back, it's tough to envision Bojan Bogdanovic being able to hold down the power forward spot. They need someone who's just a little bit bigger, a little more durable. And Tobias Harris has been playing the 4 in Philadelphia. He played the 4 in Detroit when he was here. And he gives them scoring, shooting, a lot of the same stuff, really, that Bojan Bogdanovic did, just at a much heftier price. And that's where this deal comes in for Philadelphia, as they get to shed off that big money in Tobias Harris. They're taking most of the money back. They're getting a little bit of relief, with Harris making just under $20 million and Bagley just under $13 million. And then they're getting a couple second-round picks in return for that. This will allow them to pretty much, A, get off the Harris contract, and B, start that reset that mini reset that I imagine is going to have to happen once that James Harden trade comes to fruition. They're going to have to try to make some sort of on-the-fly rebuild. This gives them a couple more second-round picks to work with, a little bit more cap flexibility, and at least in theory, they could get some bench minutes from Joe Harris and Marvin Bagley in the meantime. And then Detroit's also getting back Tim Hardaway Jr. That's a guy that they've been linked to before as well. It's a guy that's been talked about when it's come to Dallas and Detroit trading Bogdanovic. So I just kind of connected a couple dots there and threw this together. I'm sure someone's going to hate it. I'm not sure. I think if I had to pick a group, a fan base that's going to hate it, I would pick Philadelphia. But the bottom line is, you're not getting back a ton, but Tobias Harris does not have a lot of value for that contract that he has. So it's not a knock it out of the park home run deal for them, but getting off that $40 million contract, and getting a couple second round picks in the process. I think that's a lot more soluble than just holding on to Tobias Harris and really not having many other teams able to make a legitimate move for him. I don't know how close this is to being a legitimate type fair deal that would actually go down in the NBA's world. What do you think, Jasper?
Well, I think look, I'm with you. I think the Sixers fans would like it the least. But for me, it just comes down to, like, can they get off of the James Harden deal? Because if they can, then I think this trade becomes a lot more realistic from that standpoint. With Philly just saying, hey, look, this year is basically going to be a wash, and we are going to get all this money off of our books going into next year, see if we can do anything this year, and really, really try and make an impact in free agency coming up in this next offseason. From that perspective, I think it would make a lot of sense. For the Pistons, this makes a lot of sense as well. Like you said, that's an upgrade from the power forward position. I also think you can make the argument that Hardaway is a upgrade over Joe Harris, and getting out from Marvin Bagley's contract is, that's nice as well. From a flexibility perspective as well, this also puts Detroit in a better position. Yes, you are losing Joe Harris's $19 million coming off the books next year. You're also losing what is probably going to be a declining of Marvin Bagley's team option, which is going to open up another $12.5 million. So there is $32 million coming off of the books. However, Tobias Harris, $39 million coming off of the books next year. You have to eat the Hardaway contract, yes, but he's making less than Bogdanovic and signed for the same amount of time. So if anything, actually, this opens up a few more dollars next offseason and the same amount of money 2 off seasons from now. So for me, if I look at it from a Pistons perspective, I think this is actually pretty much a home run. I think it makes your team better. I think it makes your team more flexible financially. And I think it also, puts you into a position where you have better answers at, your 4 position, and really even at your backup 2 position, backup 3 position. I think that would be a really, really good deal for Detroit. I think it makes a lot of sense for Dallas as well. They want to get out from under that Hardaway contract. For me, like I said, the viability of this deal comes down to whether Philly can get off of that James Harden contract before the season starts. Because if not, I think they're probably more incentivized to just run it back another year and let Tobias Harris's contract expire at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think the other hope from Detroit's standpoint with this deal is, Tobias Harris becomes more than just a 1-year rental. He becomes a guy that you sign back on a better deal, quite frankly, longer term. But I definitely think this benefits Detroit and Dallas more than it does Philadelphia. It really comes down to the Sixers might be headed towards a complete blow up. This would give them a couple smaller contracts that would be easier to include in any sort of other deals, and give them a couple additional picks to add to their asset chest in the process. I just don't feel like Tobias Harris is. I get he's probably the best, if not the second best player in this deal, but that contract makes him so less valuable. The only thing Philadelphia could really say is, well, we'd be better off just holding on to Harris for the year and letting his contract expire. But on the flip side, they wouldn't get those picks then. And like I just said, I'm not trying to repeat myself, but they'd also have 2 other smaller deals that would probably be a little bit easier to move in separate trades than one $40 million contract in Harris. But again, I definitely could see the Philly people hating this the most.
Yeah, Aaron, and I'm going to say this. This isn't necessarily a Pistons specific thing, but we've been talking about trying, to figure out how the new CBA is going to work, how that's going to affect the league. And one immediate thing I am kind of looking for as I am trying to put together these trades is one of the consequences of the way that the NBA contracts are starting to be structured where you're kind of freezing out the middle class and giving, your star players a ton of money, your role players very little. I think you're going to see trades becoming less common over the next few years as a consequence of the CBA, because it's so hard to make salaries work when you only have big and little contracts to put together for guys that are in that, Bojan Bogdanovic 20 million range, your Joe Harris range, or even your like Tim Hardaway, your, that kind of range. It's really difficult to find things that work for both teams because they're basically building out their rosters around young, cheap players that they don't want to give up or that you're not necessarily interested in, and really highly paid vets that are going to be hard to move regardless, unless they've become, completely devalued assets. So that's something that I'm looking for in the next few years, Aaron. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it was something that I noticed as I was trying to go through these trades.
No, I think that's a good point. It makes it, like you said, it makes it harder to work on these deals when the variance in contracts is either, hey, you're up at 40, or you're either, most guys are either up at, the $40, 30, 40 million, or they're down at the, vet min or whatever it is. So
I'm thinking of like the John Collins trade this offseason.
Right.
Like, good player, 25 million, got it traded for peanuts. And basically Sadiq Bey got traded for the same reason, because he's going to command a contract in that kind of range and nobody wants to pay him.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. And it could be something that they look at, on the next CBA deal when they're trying to change the way deals are happening, because it does feel like it's becoming more of an issue. More guys are either getting pennies on the dollar to what they're worth, or they end up signing for a deal and becoming really unmovable because other teams don't have the cap space to acquire them with the contracts that they have available on their roster. So no, I think that's a good point. I will also say, just as we wrap up this segment, we both did not include any players that recently signed under contract, just because they're not able to be dealt as of today. I think, for some of them, it's like October 7th. So a month from today, as we're recording, is when that first group of players are technically allowed to be dealt that signed contracts in the off season. So that was something that we were cognizant of. I did have the Dallas in that trade. One variation of it, I did have Dallas also getting Killian Hayes as well. But I did remove that just because they have so many players that are, as of right now, unable to be dealt because of their contract signing. I just couldn't make it work with the other players that were involved. So just something I wanted to note as we wrap up that segment and move into our next topic, which we're going to talk.
It's going to be equally unpopular.
We're going to talk about a little bit of a Pistons depth chart situation. I have seen some rumblings on social media. I might have also seen it in one of our podcasts in the YouTube comment section as well. But there was some discussion about whether the Pistons should have Jaden Ivey come off the bench next year or not. And I thought that was an interesting topic, just because it's bound to draw engagement from Pistons fans, because it seems so wild to even speculate on something like Jaden Ivey, who just had a really good rookie campaign, appears to be a franchise cornerstone. It seems wild that that's being discussed, but it is. And so I wanted to bring that to the table today and talk about it just for that reason. I think we're probably both going to be aligned on how we feel about it, but I felt like it needed to be talked about, and maybe it will spark a debate or a conversation in the comments on YouTube, or if you tweet us at Palace of Pistons. Let us know what you think about it, because I'm very interested. I had seen some rumblings. I wasn't sure if it was going to pick up steam. I wanted to bring it to the forefront of the podcast and talk about it. Jasper, do you think there's any merit to the idea of having Jaden Ivey not in the starting lineup next year and coming off the bench?
I mean, there is merit to the idea, but I wouldn't do it. Look, I think there is some merit to the idea that what you want to do in order to achieve the highest ceiling of this team is to surround Cade Cunningham with as many shooters as possible, and rim finishers as possible. I think that there is merit to that idea. However, I think what's more likely is, and sorry to finish that thought. And Jaden Ivey is not necessarily a great, shooter right now. He's not a great movement shooter. He can catch and shoot, but there is, he needs to prove it more. That being said, I think really what you need in order to achieve the highest ceiling of this team is for one of Cade Cunningham or Jaden Ivey to be an elite shooter. And it doesn't really matter which one of them it is. One of them has to do it. It doesn't really matter to me, who else is in that starting lineup. But in order to truly unlock the best of what both guys can do, I still think you need that kind of fire and ice, slow and fast kind of playing style to work together. And if Jaden Ivey's coming off the bench, even if he is playing, 25, 27 minutes a game, I just think that you lose some of that and that you lose important minutes that can be used to build chemistry between these two guys in a year that, look, let's be honest, the line's set at 27 and a half. Like, they're not competing for a playoff spot. If we're being realistic, these are the minutes that you want to put them together and see exactly what they can do. On the other hand, I also see, the idea of coming out and saying, look, we can put Cade Cunningham out there with Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren, who are not great shooters. Therefore, it makes the most sense for us to also throw Joe Harris and Bojan Bogdanovic out there in order to just maximize the amount of shooting you're going to have on the floor. But I look at that and I also see like a team that is going to absolutely get ripped to shreds defensively either way. And yeah, like I said, I just think you're losing valuable minutes that you could build chemistry. In the end, this team needs both of those players to be great. I just don't see how you can make it work without both of them. You need that great backcourt. I love Asar Thompson, but like, what are you going to depend on him to be a great shooter then too? I just think you're asking way too much of other players. And I think you're also, to a certain extent, asking too much of Cade Cunningham to be the Luka Doncic type, to be the heliocentric guy. I don't think that's where he's at his best. I think he's at his best sharing some of those playmaking duties with other players on the floor. So no, I would not move Jaden Ivey to the bench. I understand why some people might see it that way, because of certain things that he showed in Summer League, which is to say perhaps holding onto the ball too much, not shooting great. But in the end, what you need is both of those players to be at their best in order for your team to be at their best. Aaron, do you see it another way?
I don't see how Jaden Ivey's not in your starting lineup if you're the Detroit Pistons. He is a franchise pillar coming off a very good rookie season. And yes, this year it's going to be different with Cade Cunningham back. The role is going to look different for Jaden Ivey. But like you mentioned, that fire and ice, that ability for Cade Cunningham to not always have to have the ball in his hand, Jaden Ivey is the guy that's going to be able to take that and take that pressure off of Cunningham and do stuff with the ball in his hands. And he needs to get better at it, but he's going into his second year in the league. Like, are we really going to judge a few summer league games and getting super, super excited for Asar Thompson and say, hey, forget about what Jaden Ivey did for 70 games in his rookie season. He had a couple rough showings in summer league. He needs to come off the bench because we have this new flashy, shiny toy in Asar Thompson, and Jaden can just come off the bench like it's 2K and give you 25 minutes and score 20 points off the bench. I just don't think it's super realistic. And it would be bad for Detroit to essentially admit that he can't work with Cade Cunningham. I mean, the fact of the matter is they drafted him 1 year ago And they did it with Cade Cunningham on the roster, with Cade Cunningham in mind. So it would essentially be admitting that they haven't built the team out properly and have to pretty much punt on a top 5 pick being a franchise pillar. So I get the idea of we need more spot-up shooting around Cade Cunningham. We need more defense in the starting lineup. But it's not Jaden Ivey's fault, and it shouldn't come at the expense of Jaden Ivey for the front office not building up the rest of their starting lineup around and with him and Cade Cunningham in mind, and building the lineup out to what they need and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So, yeah, I don't think it makes sense. I wouldn't do it. I don't know if the idea is, hey, start obviously Cade Cunningham and then go Joe Harris, Asar Thompson, or go Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Bojan Bogdanovic, Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren. Let's get bigger. Let's get longer. Let's get a little bit more defensive minded. I don't know if it's, hey, let's go with Joe Harris and Asar Thompson and Bojan Bogdanovic. So we keep some semblance of more floor spacing and more catch and shoot, but we're going to be terrible defensively.
Oh my God. I'm just like thinking of that lineup. Like, oh my God. What oh my goodness.
I mean,
well,
they're going to be sad, but that would be an atrocity. So
I want to say this too. Here's the thing. If you're moving Jaden Ivey to the bench because you're saying there's not enough shooting with him in the starting lineup, what you're basically admitting is that Isaiah Stewart playing the 4 and developing him there is more important than developing Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey together. Is it not?
No, I agree. Yes.
Right? Because you're saying, oh, well, there's not enough shooting in the starting lineup if you're putting out Duren and Isaiah Stewart there together. Well, whose fault is that? It's not Jaden Ivey's fault. Like that to me, I think that's just like, that's building a team ass backwards, in my opinion. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you prioritize the development of your power forward over the development of the guy you picked 5th overall last year and should have been all rookie first team and was just freaking awesome? What? Because he looked bad in a few summer league games? That's just absurd to me. The more I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, how ridiculous is that? And two, I'll say this as well. Look, you talk about, Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham not being proven shooters. What is the best way to shoot a high percentage from 3? It's to get open looks. What's the easiest way to get open looks? To have somebody else make plays for you. What do Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey do? They make plays for other players. So if you're trying to maximize the shooting from both of those guys, why would you split them up, not put them together? Like what, Joe Harris is going to be beating guys off the dribble and kicking it out to Cade Cunningham for open shots? No freaking way. He's going to be standing around on the perimeter. What? You're going to have Cade Cunningham cutting to the basket? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think for me, yeah, you have to play those two guys together. Otherwise, you're building your roster all wrong. You're prioritizing the wrong players, and you're stunting the growth of the 2 most important stars on this roster. So that's how I feel about it.
We are in agreement there, as I anticipated we would be. I just wanted to bring it to the table. Like I said, I'm interested to know what everyone else thinks. Like I said, let us know on Twitter at Palace of Pistons. Let us know if you're watching on YouTube. Respond in the comments section what you think. I think we'll see some people that think Ivey should come off the bench, but I think we're going to be in the majority here that he belongs in the starting lineup. Just for reference, the ESPN depth chart has the Pistons starting Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Jalen Duren. As I've said, I believe the Pistons will begin the season with Cunningham, Ivey, Bogdanovic, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren as the starting 5. But I'm not seeing anyone, any reputable bigger name sites or reporters indicating that there's really any chance of Ivey coming off the bench to begin the year or at any point, anything like that. So I don't think we'll see it. But like I said, wanted to bring it to the table. Let us know what you think. Jasper, those were our 2 topics. That's what I had planned for this week's show. We are now a month out from preseason basketball beginning. We should have some news on the NBA media days beginning. I would imagine that those will take place towards the end of the month, right before the start of training camp. But is there anything else you wanted to talk about as we wrap up this week's show?
Nah, man, this season can't come soon enough. We just spent 40 minutes talking about 3 things that will never happen. And I would even suspect, well, other than the trade you put together, well, I don't even think either of us would be in support of. So luckily, it's coming to a close. I promise you folks, please don't get mad at us. We have a job to do, and we just like talking about basketball as well. So, it's not all that serious. I promise.
True. We just want to talk hoop. I mean, it would be boring for me to take off, July, from the middle of July to the beginning of October, just because there's not going to be a whole lot of news going on with the Pistons. There's not going to be a ton going on with them. I would hate to do that. I love putting on the show every week, and it allows us to do some funner topics that are a little bit more off the wall, maybe don't have as much traction behind them, and they're not just specific news related of things that happen or what's been going on the court. So I know at times the conversations, the topics of discussion can be a little wonky, but I also think they're fun and they're thought-provoking. And I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years or maybe longer at this point, and I don't know, I find these as sometimes some of the most engaging discussions. I mean, I remember podcasting eons ago with different people talking about Andre Drummond being the franchise center of the future for the Detroit Pistons, and those conversations that aren't necessarily related to what's going on directly on the court or in the news with the Pistons, but happen in the doldrums of the off season. Those bring out the most emotion, the most fun, and bring in the most engagement from the listeners, which is obviously something that we want each and every week. So hope you enjoyed these conversations, these topics of discussion, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, and if you have stuff as well that you'd like us to talk about on this podcast, we love to hear from you guys. Anything new is always fun. Like you said, Aaron, like we come up with certain things on these podcasts that you think that nothing is really going to be talked about that's important. I remember last year in preseason when we were watching the Pistons play the Knicks, and we came out of that thinking like, oh, Sadiq Bey and Bojan Bogdanovic is not going to work together. The Pistons are going to get killed there. So, sometimes those lesser podcasts are the ones where you actually come to the bigger realizations. And that's why it's fun. That's why it's fun to talk about this stuff, because sometimes when you think you're not talking about anything important, you come up with the best answers.
No doubt about it. A fun show this week. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. As we wrap up, make sure to check us out on our socials at Palace of Pistons. You'll find us most active on our Twitter page. You can follow each of us on Twitter as well. Myself at A Johnson NBA and Jasper at Blade Cunningham. Make sure to check out the website as well, palaceofpistons.com. We will have content coming soon and throughout the 2023-2024 season. Make sure to leave us a like, a review, a comment, follow, subscription, wherever you're tuning in from. We sincerely appreciate it. And let us know what you think about the show. Thanks, everyone, for listening to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. Make sure to use our promo code at BetOnline, Believe, BLEAV, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's going to do it for us this week on the Palace of Pistons podcast. We'll see you next week, hopefully, with a full-strength crew of myself, Jasper, and our long-lost host, Mike Angelano. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you guys next time.